Hello, I'm Mary Ito, and welcome to CRAM. CRAM is an acronym for Communicating Research and More, which is what we try to do on this podcast. A lot of exciting research and groundbreaking ideas never reach the public, but they have the potential to change the way we think and act. There are many reasons why someone goes to prison. It could be theft, fraud, drug trafficking, assault, murder, or even to get an education. It's true. These are students on the outside who go into prisons to learn alongside individuals who've been incarcerated. It's a special program that's been going on for over a decade in Canada, and it's run by an organization called Walls to Bridges. Simone Davis is a co-founder of the Walls to Bridges program. She's also a professor and teaches in the Ethics, Society, and Law program at the University of Toronto. Hello, Simone.
Hello, Miriam. Thanks so much for having me on.
Oh, I'm so pleased you're joining us. You know, I guess I'm wondering, going back, how did you get interested in this kind of education to start with?
As a child, I actually always had a dream of educational starting of school that would have the power to change the world. I had extremely lofty ambitions as a kid, and it was really based on this sort of appreciation of all the things that I'd learned and heard about free schools. And I had a large notebook that I filled with scribbles with a lot of exclamation marks with circles and hearts underneath them. And but there was a deep sense inside me that when people learn and explore together with their full trust and respect of their value as learners and as teachers and discoverers, that certain kinds of injustice or inequity can be overcome through that invitation. And I had that sense as a kid, really strong. I got thinking also about prison from early on, because as a child, my father, Chandler Davis, was imprisoned in the United States. It wasn't for long. I think he was in for 6 months during the McCarthy period. And it affected, although his time there was short, it affected our lives very much and the kind of the family culture. And
can I just stop you for those people who aren't familiar with that era and why someone would get in prison? Can you just briefly explain why?
Oh, yeah, sure. So the House and Un-American Activities Committee was virulently anti-communist and I guess anti-free speech force in American politics under Eugene McCarthy. And my father decided to, and was a young professor of mathematics at the University of Michigan. And he made a decision that he did not feel that this committee had a right to bring him in for questioning about his political views and activities. He felt that that was beyond their purview. And so he made a decision to refuse to testify on the grounds of the Free Speech Amendment. And he pleaded the first, and it meant that he knew he would go to prison. So he very purposefully went to prison in order to protest the workings of the House and Un-American Activities Committee. And when he got out, he was blacklisted in the U.S. And that's how we wound up coming to Canada when I was 5, coincidentally, but great. I'm very appreciative of that fact.
Yeah. And so with that kind of direct personal experience, how did that impact you, having a father who spent time in prison?
Well, I think it ended up creating a bit of a shift in the culture of our family household and just the way we talk to each other. We always heard stories of his time inside. And from the very, very get-go, I had this distinct impression and experience of what it meant to have a beloved family member behind bars, and also the reality of humans inside who were living and thinking and feeling things and discovering things and struggling and restrained from their own homes and communities. I think that led me to feel a sense of obligation from very early on to maintain awareness of who it was that was behind prison walls. So that was a really early inception.
Early, yeah. And so, I mean, then later on, I mean, you were a professor and then you became involved in co-founding this program, Walls to Bridges, which originally, I guess, was known as Inside Out. Can you just tell us, what is this program?
Sure. Well, Walls to Bridges was for a brief time Inside Out Canada at its inception, and now it's an autonomous Canadian program. And both Inside Out Prison Exchange Program down in the United States, which is where I got trained and was involved for years in the US, and the Walls to Bridges program, they have a few things very closely in common. And that is the project of increasing access to education for people in prisons and jails, and creating dialogue and mutual understanding and respect between university-based students or college-based in the U.S. and students who are incarcerated in prisons or jails. So the university-based students and the professor make their way into the jail or prison once weekly, and together the university students and the incarcerated students are equals. They're classmates sharing a class, which is facilitated by the professor from outside, and often by an alumni of the course who may well themselves be incarcerated, and kind of helping the faculty facilitator hold the frame of the class.
And these are credit courses, right? They're post-secondary credit courses. So someone perhaps could get a credit, work towards a degree.
Indeed. And in fact, at Grand Valley, which is the institution, it's a women's federal facility in Kitchener, very close to the Faculty of Social Work of Wilfrid Laurier University. And the social work faculty is just close to the Kitchener, to the Grand Valley Institution. And so a lot of courses have run there, taught both by Wilfrid Laurier profs and then also profs from other universities. So I would say that some of the people who are incarcerated at Grand Valley have taken numerous for credit courses and made a really substantial stride towards work towards a degree when they get out.
What is it, though, about this program and the way it approaches education that makes it unique? Because education within prisons has existed, right, in other forms, and it's existed for a while. So what is it about this program that is unique, you feel?
Sure. Well, just first, just for a second, an aside, education in prison is certainly, education in prison has a long history, but it also has a contested history. And there are many, many barriers to educational programming in prison, and times when it's sort of flourished, and then when there's been a real crackdown on educational programs inside, particularly when you get to beyond the high school level. So it waxes and wanes. It's always been a call from people inside for more access to education. But it's a contested and complex story. Both Inside Out and Walls to Bridges believe that there's in the idea of whole self learning. So you have assembled together students who might otherwise never meet, incarcerated students and students from school universities beyond. So immediately there's a wall that divides people. And it's not only prison walls, there's also walls around the ivory towers, they call it. So there are all kinds of barriers that keep people from meeting and being co-learners, mutual teachers and learners. So that immediately is unseated. And there's this opportunity to transcend the walls that divide us, as Laurie Pompa says.
So let me just stop you there.
Yeah.
So with that idea of bringing students from the outside in to learn, what is the impact? What happens when that occurs? Because people on the inside could learn courses on their own, right? They don't necessarily have to have students from the outside with them. So what is it about that mix that is warranted, right? That you want that mix.
Yes. Well, there are the mutual benefits look a little like this. So for the incarcerated students, well, first of all, people are hungry for connection of the sort that involves human, intellectual, mutually respectful exploration. That invites the kind of it ups the ante in the room when people are taking themselves and each other seriously as as intellectual explorers, and that is a benefit on both sides. Preconceived notions are immediately challenged about oneself and one's limits, and also about the others in the room. So stigma and stereotyping becomes a lot harder when you're engaging in this project of co-learning. That's
So
one.
what might be a stigma, let's say, on the side of the student coming from the outside and on the student on the inside?
Oh,
What would be some of those,
yeah.
stigmas?
So an outside student might feel one of two different feelings. One would be fear about those people the dehumanized folks who must wind up inside, assuming that something about their criminal identity is the truest and deepest thing about them, and somehow that there's a simple fear simply in sharing space with them. Another fear that the university-based students might have, particularly university students who are people of color, a great fear about walking into the space that is prison, can be extraordinarily vexing and scary, and therefore and can lead to an overall doubt about the experience.
Mm.
Or a university-based student can feel, I get nothing to offer these people. What about my life experience could possibly be relevant? And if we're having like this serious dialogue about life, I know nothing. And so those are some of the kinds of things that you can hear on the university side that can create a barrier that gets overcome through the class experience itself. Similarly, or differently, on the other side, the sorts of things you might hear would be, those kind of debutantes from the outside will have thin learning and have a deep misunderstanding of who we are, and they're likely to have bias against us. Or if they're here, maybe they're here to be voyeuristic about us. They're only interested in us sort of as guinea pigs or objects of scrutiny that are somehow fascinating to them, rather than like I am simply an equivalent classmate.
Yeah.
Sometimes people can, on both sides, people on the inside can feel doubts about themselves. They've been told that their whole identity is conflated with the crime they were convicted for. And they may have had educational experiences that were not life-affirming or positive. They may have even been told in grade school or high school that you're no good, don't try for that dream. And so they may have profound doubts about themselves as learners. Not necessarily, but sometimes that can be a reality. I certainly wouldn't generalize to say that's true of everyone. It isn't.
Do you know, and I'm wondering whether, and I guess really now I'm bringing in the outside and the public, which I guess the university students represent because they are the public too, coming from the outside in, but even just the wider public, with that very fundamental difference that the people on the outside did not commit a crime, right? And they're not imprisoned. Whereas the people on the inside did commit some kind of offense, which is why they are in jail. What kind of challenge does that present? Because I'm guessing that some people would think, well, right there's a hierarchy in place, right? That the people from the outside is somehow viewed as being more privileged or even better, quote unquote, than the people on the inside because they are paying the price now for whatever they did and they're incarcerated. So is that a kind of challenge that you have to deal with as well?
Oh, you mean
From the
in public
public's point of view?
perception?
Yeah, in the public's perception.
Sure. I mean, I think that the idea of a free education for people who are inside, or a free educational opportunity for people who are inside, can rankle people on the outside for the reasons that you just laid out. I think that what we kind of say in response to that is we are emerging out of a firm conviction that education is a human right. Also, the people who are inside will be emerging. They will be coming back to family, to community, and to our larger society. And often when they emerge, they find that there are not the kinds of supports and systems in place that they really need to flourish or thrive or to be able to do well as citizens in society. Um, there's a lot of cards stacked against you when you get out. Educational opportunities inside can really make a difference in terms of preparing people to return as really ready to be contributing members of society. To me, that is a part of accountability. When you think about the mandate of a university, it includes, and if you look at like the strategic plans of many of the universities that are across Canada, what you'll discover is that there is a commitment there to being civically responsible and to being good neighbors and to kind of expanding educational opportunity to people who are less able to access education. So those kinds of goals for educational equity and for being, like I said, good neighbors to the
Mm-hmm.
community that houses and supports them.
So would that be then the larger goal of the program? Yes, I understand you can get a credit, you could possibly get a university degree, but what's the larger goal then of this? What are you hoping for?
To really open up. You have to have. I believe that the access goal and the equity goal for people who have experienced and are experiencing incarceration does need to stay right there in the mix. If you're talking about Walls to Bridges goal, but there's a larger overall goal of transformation through transforming the educational experience itself and through connection. Walls to bridges. There's a metaphor right there, and we make bridges when we overcome the walls that keep people apart. And those bridges of understanding and exploration and shared analysis will help bring solutions that our society needs. There's a kind of brilliance that unfolds when you change the way education looks and feels, not only by assembling different groups of people, but also by having a far more humane and whole self learning experience when you create a classroom space together. So,
Tell me what that actual experience when students from the outside and inside are together, what can that be like? What
well,
does that feel like? Do you know what? Yeah. What is it like?
Well, it has a lot to do. I need to sort of step back and look at the pedagogy a little bit because it's not they're not there taking a traditional class, a university class. We sit in circle, very impacted and humbly learning about for lifelong learning on the part of us facilitators about Indigenous approaches to circle work is one of the things that really motivates us. And they sit in circle, and immediately learning is understood as something where the teacher's not the expert, the teacher's a frame holder. Everyone in the room comes with the expertise and wisdom about their own life experiences, and everyone comes with their own reflection and understanding about their readings and we engage in processes of deep listening, careful share respectful and brave sharing about our own experiences and connecting our experiences with the readings. And all of that knowledge is brought to bear. We also believe, and I'll show you in a minute what this can actually feel like in class, but we really believe in whole self learning, experiential learning, where our minds, our hearts, Our bodies and our spirits are all part of the way we learn and the way we offer learnings to one another. So,
Do you know, I have to tell you, yeah, I mean, listening to you talk about the pedagogy and what's involved, it reminds me of, I guess it was an essay or a report, I'm not quite sure, that you helped write with a person on the inside, Bruce Michaels was
yes,
his
that's
name?
his name,
Yes.
yes.
And that article, it raised so many questions that I had never thought about when it comes to education on the inside. You know, questions about, well, what is a teacher? Who gets to be a teacher? And who gets to dispense that knowledge? And then what is that knowledge? What's the knowledge worth sharing? Those questions I had never really thought about, right? Because coming from a very traditional
Yeah,
educational background, there was a teacher at the front. That teacher basically was on high and dispensed the knowledge, and then we absorbed it and memorized it,
yes,
really, right? And regurgitated it back for the most part. I
100%.
mean, now today education has changed a lot. There's much more critical thinking involved. But then when you put that idea inside a prison, these questions are ones that you've thought, you and others have thought very deeply about.
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for mentioning that, and mentioning Bruce Michaels too, who's a prison down in Michigan, and he has created enormous amounts of peer support education programming inside, where the incarcerated folks are setting up and offering learning spaces and opportunities using correspondence courses from without to support other students and spread a culture of learning throughout the whole institution. And he really was a wonderful challenger to me of some of the ways that I was thinking about the work I was doing. And we co-wrote this piece together. Um, I'll tell you one thing. For someone trained as a university professor, we are trained to nervously to build a great mountain of expertise and knowledge, and to nervously suppress any feelings we might have of imposter syndrome, and to we're
Which I hear is actually quite common among professors, I
indeed.
was told.
And then to feel that our project, when we get in front of a classroom, indeed is to deliver content, and we will hope to deliver content as fulsomely as possible. And we want the students we are trained to feel that the students in our space need to deliver the content that we need to receive and integrate the content that we have decided is crucial for them to learn. And that we need at all costs. This can be in progressive classrooms as well. There's still a very powerful faculty agenda about what needs to happen during that class. And to be trained in
Mm.
this kind of pedagogy means to some extent to truly unsettle my idea about what expertise consists of and about what needs to happen during our 2 hours together. And
Okay,
so,
so
yeah.
sorry. So then, I don't want to miss that question. So then, just going back, what is the difference in that kind of experience as opposed to the traditional learning experience that, I'm familiar with, you're familiar with, having taught that way? What happens in this classroom?
So it really invites the students to own the process. So we show up in a Walls to Bridges class, and I bring this pedagogy to other work that I do as well. We show up, and the class might well start sitting in a circle with a circle go round, and it might just be a check-in. How are you today? If you've got students who are coming from the outside, they've had a set of experiences. They came in maybe on a bus or carpooling. They got checked in to the facility and they made their way to their room. And they've had the week they've had. And then you have the incarcerated students who have had a different kind of week. They may be facing struggles and stresses that are very particular to what it feels like to be in prison. And they show up in the room. And this is where they will be remaining that night. So those check-ins at the
Mm.
beginning are a way for everyone to get grounded, to get connected, and to let's say, okay, what matters first here is that our whole selves are in this space together and greeting one another. And sometimes it could take the form of a prompt that a student might suggest. A student might say, let's all get up and each take turns offering a stretch that will do for the other people to try. Or maybe someone would say, if you were a song or a musical accompaniment to a movie, what kind of music would be playing right now to express your mood today?
These are kind of like icebreakers, really,
Totally,
right? Like
completely. And
yeah. Well, I'm wondering too. Okay, does it happen there when there may be, if they meet for the first time, some suspicion, some kind of anxiety, maybe on the part of some people about this
totally.
new situation? Yeah,
Or
yeah.
worry about oneself. It isn't just fear of the other. It's also like, how will I be in this space? How will I be seen? Will I know what to say?
Hmm.
And that can
Are
be
the outside sorry, are the
everyone.
outside oh, okay, and are the outside students, are they ever concerned about safety? Does safety ever come up as an issue or not?
Oh, sure. They have processing of their own. Both, and a lot of that work happens before they arrive in class. There's
Mm,
a lot of prep work that happens on both sides before anyone winds up sitting in class together. Yeah.
okay. Oh, you're right, because these people on both sides, all the students are interviewed, right, ahead of time and
Yes,
chosen for this program.
that's right. Everyone in the class
Hmm.
writes a letter of interest explaining why they're kind of think it sounds like an opportunity that they'd like to be part of, what they think they'd bring to the circle. And then that's followed by a 45-minute interview in each case.
Yeah, and I mean, because these are credit courses. I mean, these are courses, university courses that they're taking. Is it following the same content that the university course would if it was offered outside?
Very much so. Yes. I mean,
Okay.
there's a syllabus, there are readings, there are writing assignments that often take the form of reflection papers and maybe a research paper as well. And then
Mm.
one aspect of the course content that can be distinct to the Walls to Bridges setting, and Inside Out does this too, and that is to have a collaborative group project.
Can it get? Can it ever get very emotional?
Can be deeply emotional in times, at times in class. Some of the readings that we touch on can be challenging. Some of the shared stories that people are always at choice about whether they share a story, how and when. Um, there's no sort of digging for information about people's lives. There's also moments where emotion needs where people need a minute. What matters most in this moment is that this room community and this individual student need to take a moment and find what's necessary for healing. Sometimes a student might need a minute or a timeout, like just please not, like they might need some support on the sideline from another student, say.
Hmm.
Sometimes the whole class needs to just pause and say, what just happened there? And kind of do a retreat and kind of explore the moment. So that kind of emphasis on the classroom community's well-being is fundamental to this kind of teaching experience. And it is itself a learning. It's not just a pause while we get our act together and then return to the learning. It's a learning about how we all ought to be together. And I
Mm.
think I have powerful feelings that the learning over the course of a Walls to Bridges class, or in the other kinds of pedagogical experiments that I also deeply care about that I'm involved in, this learning how to be a collectivity across difference, respecting the differences, and and caring about the similarities, um, where we are all mutually respectful, and also where caring is not trying to fix you, but it is trying to be together with you, is something that I think our society desperately needs. Our educational system needs it, and it's needed throughout all of our institutions.
Mhm. So, yeah, as we said, this program has been going on in Canada for over a decade. What kind of results have you gotten from this? I mean, I'm wondering, how do you measure the success of a program like this?
So 92 educators from around Canada, some from the US, some from France and the UK, have been through this training. And in Canada, courses have been offered in 4 locations in Ontario, in Winnipeg, Manitoba, in Edmonton, Alberta, in British Columbia, and dozens and dozens of courses have run in multiple disciplines.
Are we talking hundreds, if not thousands, of students have gone through over a decade?
Each class has approximately 10 each.
They're very small. Okay, 10.
That's a typical size.
Okay.
10 each or sometimes a dozen each, or sometimes smaller, sometimes larger. So each class is quite small.
Going back to those larger goals that you were talking about outside of receiving the credit, getting the degree, is there follow-up that is done with people once they do leave? Because that was the whole point, right? These people are going to go out into society, and you hope they're able to use these new skills. They can be productive. They can lead good, satisfying lives. I mean, is there any follow-up that's done?
I want to take a minute and just kind of say, Mary, I don't know, just push back on the idea of what success can look like. I believe that people moving through a course, even if they then have struggles beyond the class, if they move through that course and their best self was present, and I don't mean this just for incarcerated students, I mean anyone in the class, including the facilitator. If you show up in a class and you help to create something beautiful together, and you are doing deep learning and deep offering, I consider that to be a success that isn't eradicated by struggles that might follow. And so I kind of want to just put that out there.
Mm-hmm. No, that's good. Yeah, I understand that. So you're saying that moment, that experience in and of itself is worthy.
It counts for something.
Yeah.
And I think you and so the person who may have gone on and had terrible struggles, during that class, they may have been a source of generous support to someone else in the class who needed just what they had to offer, and who took the strength that they gained from engagement with that person onto the rest of their lives. So there's ripple effects going in all directions.
Yeah, Simone, I understand what you're saying, but that must be difficult when society has other standards of success and they want to see statistics. They look at recidivism. They look at, right, all those things with people who then move to the outside. And also they look at, well, why should we fund you? We need to see some kind of, other measurements of success. Do you not deal with those challenges?
Well, we certainly can provide the stats, and there's stats stepping away specifically from walls to bridges. There's statistics that have been developed about the impact of education while you're inside on recidivism, and that are unequivocal. It's about the very best sort of intervention that you can offer for folks inside. And it's one of the reasons why people who are themselves incarcerated again and again and again raise it as a key demand. If you look at even strikes and uprisings that have happened over the decades inside, usually one of the very first demands is we yearn for more education inside. But similarly, people on the outside get to care about that too, because no matter what your political views are about the criminal justice system or any of this stuff, the tough on crime people can themselves acknowledge that keeping people out and stopping the revolving door is a goal. It saves everyone money. And so I rarely spend time sitting in this reality because it's not the way I connect the dots. But it's not what I think matters about what we're doing this work for, perhaps motivated by a different conceptual frame. That said, I can step aside and say that education is a beautiful response to preventing the recidivism that causes everyone so much money and decreases what well-being and safety in society at large.
That's, I understand it. I just wanted to put it into the context of the other frameworks that are operating outside of yours, right? And those are a reality.
Yeah, so the
Yeah.
stats are impressive, and the number of people that move through the system, the number through the project, through the program, and get credits, the number of people of university students who will report this was the best experience that they've ever had in their entire university education. I can't tell you what the testimonies are like and how commonly I hear that word. They say, this was learning that I'll never forget. This was learning that changed the trajectory of my professional plans and that changed me as a person. And that similarly, you can hear statements of that much enthusiasm and a sense of a deep commitment to making society a better place and to understanding their own value and trying to grow it for people on the inside as well. So these things are
Life-changing.
on paper.
It sounds like,
They're
yeah.
life-changing often and on paper. I don't require them to be life-changing for everyone, because if you force transformation down someone's throat and insist they get transformed, that's not going with the flow.
Well, and even with yourself, it's totally changed the way you teach. And now it has, spilled over into other areas, right, of teaching for you. You're carrying on with other projects that have been influenced by this work.
Yes. Yeah, it's changed. It's completely changed how I teach my regular university classes. Mm-hmm. And which I also teach in Circle. We also do small group activities, and we explore. I use a lot of the same experiential activities and Circle process approaches in all of my teaching. And I've also really gotten interested in with my collaborator at the University of Toronto, Carrie Taylor, who teaches at the Center for Criminology and Sociolegal Studies. Shout out to Carrie. We're working on taking some of the same idea of prioritizing educational access and educational in overcoming educational inequity as a basic human right. So we take that principle and we take the pedagogy and we take the practices of co-learning and of assembling different kinds of people together to learn together. And we've pivoting it away from the prison and jail context to other kinds of collaborative projects. I'm right now in the second year of a pilot, which we do hope to grow in collaboration with a simply wonderful City of Toronto youth development unit at the City of Toronto. Has two interlocking projects: the Community Healing Project and the Community Peers Project. And their project, it's such a beautiful organization. I've just learned so much from working with them. The Community Healing and Peers projects find youth leaders in 6 GTA neighborhoods where there's a lot of racial, they're experiencing a lot of racism, a lot of economic marginalization, a lot of violence, often over policing, many forces of marginalization. They locate youth leaders who are interested, who sign up to take this training. And they learn they are trained by the City of Toronto's program to become peer support workers and to do mental health resiliency workshops. They're offered all these wraparound supports while they move through this, because they've often been face to face navigating a lot of hardship. All of them have confronted bias and educational inequity. And many of them have reasons to be really suspicious of academic spaces. Will they be welcoming? Will they be respectful? Will they count what I know as knowledge?
And then you're bringing them all together into a classroom.
Exactly, then. Same model. So
the
peers and the healers who want to be who are interested in taking a class with me, and some university students who are interested in taking the same class, We're meeting as are meeting as classmates in a course. My class is called The Stories We Tell About Choice, and it's an ethics, society, and law course hosted by Trinity College at U of T. And it's a class about choice, and we're taking it together.
It makes me think back to at the very beginning of this interview when you talked about being a young girl and, thinking about that free society and how it operated. Is that still in the back of your mind? I mean, I don't know if you really abandoned that ever.
I no, it actually drives me. I am the same girl, but I want to say it's been unseated in certain good ways. I learn a great deal from the people that I'm working with, and I allow myself to be pushed. I attempt humbly and with ongoing learnings involved to offer and to help to facilitate an anti-racist and decolonizing educational space. And that means among other things, it means me continuing to do in a lifelong way a lot of work on confronting the way white privilege can reinstitute itself inside me and the ways in which I can continue to grab at sources of control that bureaucracy hands me unbidden. And that can continue to sink its way right in to the way I show up. And I need to step back. That process of stepping back at the same time as I'm moving forward into discomfort is always part of the work for me. And when I say we're all learners and we're all teachers, I have a great deal to learn by people who have about racism and how it is experienced by people who are not white, by my Black students and colleagues, and Indigenous and Asian and South Asian. And I don't know things. There's all sorts of things I don't know about the experience of people with other gender identities, and abilities and disabilities. If I don't keep being a learner, I need to check myself again and again and again, even about the whole project I'm so enthusiastic about that we're talking about here today. So staying humble comes even before, is always commingled with the zest of that young girl with her triple exclamation marks. They're always in a dance.
Where would you like to see the impact of what you're doing spill over into society?
Thank you for asking that question. I believe that people, when we learn things, all of us who are part of a circle of Wallster Bridges or Inside Out or the circle I just described, who are in those circles, if we learn things about what it means to create space together that feels like this, where people are doing deep listening, and where people are showing up with their authentic selves and kind of checking their egos at the door and being ready to be transformed or changed by things that someone else might say to them instead of just staying stuck in their, Parker Palmer says, your private foxholes of belief. We really have a very schismed society right now. So the more people that learn things about that way of showing up together and then go out into whatever spheres of life they're working in, that is a gift that goes on giving, and it can show up in a lot of different ways. I had a colleague I worked with in the Inside Out Prison Exchange program who used the metaphor of Queen Anne's lace. And she said, if you imagine a Queen Anne's lace cluster, you see all these it's made up of a bunch of little circles, and the circles are all networking with each other. And then the plant grows and grows and grows. So it sounds utopian, but I honestly believe that the circle work is the hardest work ever, and that the more of us that learn how to do it, it spills over. It changes. Hopefully, it changes the criminal legal system, and each prison and jail that holds those circles Hopefully it changes the educational system. And then as each person moves through their lives into other spheres and does other kinds of work, hopefully it also helps to change what we bring to our encounters with each other.
Mm. Thank you so much for sharing your work and your experiences with us, and continued success with your programs, your pilot work. And we hope to hear more
Oh,
about it,
thank
Simone, in the
you.
future.
Oh, it's been so great to sit and talk with you, Mary. And thank you so much for your
Thank
interest.
you. Simone Davis is a co-founder of the Walls to Bridges program. She's also a professor and teaches the Ethics, Society, and Law program at Trinity College at the University of Toronto. For more information about Walls to Bridges, please go to our show notes. That is it for this edition of the CRAM podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. And a special thanks to our donor, the Temerty Foundation, for their generous support. And you might also be interested in our literary podcast called Passage to Wonderland. I highlight compelling passages from books that offer discovery, insight, and resolution. Thanks again for joining us, and see you next time.